Okay, with the legislative session starting this Monday, which will be a 90-day sprint fest, as possibly as high as 600, 600 bills will get passed through, and maybe 300 get voted on. That was what it was last legislative session. So it's only 3 months, starting this Monday, and there's going to be a huge flurry. It is election year for for our District 23. Representatives, Senator Lakey, and then two of the representatives. And they vote on things like the library, pornography bill, um, grocery taxes, school choice, income taxes, quite a bit of things that affect our lives. Um, and they also, a lot of the statutes govern how the cities can manage themselves, and even county levels. So, and then also the abortion. So the state level does have a lot, why you should care. Now, there is a greater kind of a, you know, there's kind of a greater battle going on, which, the Democrats, they tend to, do their own thing in Boise, and I believe Pocatello is like the other location or other stronghold. But for the most part, the rest of the areas there's kind of a battle between ideological um, libertarian sort of people, or what they would self-identify as conservatives, true conservatives, and then you have the others which they pejoratively call, or depending on which side you're on, you'll call them extremists, right? And then the other side are what they call rhinos, or Republicans in name only. What they would call themselves probably are moderates, or just Republicans. Moderate Republicans, common sense Republicans, and they will tend to vote closer down the middle, on the political spectrum in terms of government involvement and governmental expenditure, closer in line with the Democrats. So why this matters is because we choose, we vote, or CUNA basically votes on the two representatives, and because it's all decided in the primaries, so it's all going to happen around May, in a couple months. So their session's going to end, and so what I'm going to be doing is doing a review of the previous year, the previous first 3 months or 4 months, to see what our representatives were doing, what Senator Lakey and then the two representatives, how they, whatever I could find online publicly. To the degree Representative Durant, I notified all of them. I invited them to talk to me on air about their voting records and various metrics that I'll be bringing up, kind of like, I guess, a midterm job or performance review for our elected representatives, and see if they want to talk about it, because there is a big discussion right now, because of there's the way things have always been, right? And the way things that have always been in Idaho typically is the big companies run the show, and the representatives just pretty much rubber stamp and get things going. Good for business. What's good for business is good for Idaho. And then the other side, you have the more, I guess, ideological conservatives, based off of more on principle, and they're pushing back against that, and they see that, they'll label that as crony capitalism. Now and then the corporations, or sorry, the PACs, or the political organizations that tend to stand in place for each side. The most prominent one is IACI, which is the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry. They just kind of act as a stand-in. I'm not going to say that they're the brains of it. I see things more nuanced. And then on the other side of things, the more on the ideological side, you'll hear about the Idaho Freedom Foundation, IFF, and then they'll throw out the president, Wayne Hoffman, being the big boogeyman, controlling Dorothy Moon. There is a different article on that. But anyway, in terms of CUNA, these are things you kind of need to get a bigger picture, because before I start, talking about doing a performance review, it really is dependent upon which perspective you're coming from. Because if you're coming from the pro big business, the job creators, they bring in the tax money, whatever they want, let's just do what they say. You're going to be probably closer to the IACI side of things on who they endorse. If you tend to be more of a individualist, leave me alone, low taxes, don't bother me, get out of my business. If you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. Kind of deal tends to be, the moral aspect is another layer, which I may touch on in here. But in terms of the financial side, they want low taxes and as little government services as possible. So that is perceived to be more ideologically right, or what they would say is true conservatism. And then the ones that are in bed with big business, they'll say are the crony capitalists or the rhinos, Republicans in name only. So that's kind of the general thing. So now the ideological point of view of low taxes, low government involvement, as little as possible, more, going more toward the libertarian sort of view of things is, that's easy to explain. I mean, it's very principally based, and it's easy for them to go back to the intent of the founding fathers. Now, the big business side of things, that is just the way things have always been. And when you say that's un-American, you got to look all the way even. It's not a flaw in the system. It's a how do you say it? How do they say it's intended. It's intended. And because when you look at the founding fathers and you read their letters, they never wanted pure democracy. They never wanted mob rule. It's a representative. There's different ways to say it, but a representative constitutional sort of government. You elect your representatives, and then they'll know what they're doing, and they'll do it. But even the founding fathers, when they originally allowed voting, it was only for landowners, typically white males. Okay, I mean, they allowed the states to determine their own. I think New Jersey ended up opening it up, but for the most part, when you look at the writings, they didn't want super poor people who didn't own any land. Definitely they didn't offer it to the slaves, right? And definitely not to the the Chinese or whatever immigrants are there, not to the Native Americans that were already there. So it was already a very kind of elitist sort of system. And so when I say that Idaho has always kind of been running this way, and which is why you don't see much dialogue from their part, except to throw out, oh, they're extremists, they're right wings, or they'll say, oh, I'm a fifth generation Idahoan. It's because that's how they've done things, all the time, and they haven't seen any sort of problems. And then you have all of these newcomers, coming in from California who are essentially refugees from the liberal policies, right, or the globalist sort of policies, and they're angry. I mean, if you visited San Diego and then you compare the winter now, why would you go from San Diego to Boise unless things got really bad regarding the policies? So anyway, that's a long-winded way to say I probably should have just gone up with the data, but the way that Idaho or Boise, CUNA is set up, there's not many employers in CUNA. So probably most of the people in CUNA are employed by companies that have 500 or more employees. And so this metric here, which I had up this whole time during my whole explanation of what the general state politics are, or kind of the battles that are going on, is it's 180. You can do the math. So about 180 companies have 27% of the employment. And so, that includes St. Luke's, Walmart, Micron. I'm sure there's other ones I just can't think of off the top of my head that are very big employers, and likely quite a bit of people in CUNA or voters work for those companies, those top, we're going to say the top 180 companies. And when you look at the taxes that these companies bring, and I did the math here. These 180, if you do exact, I'm not sure how exact it is, but if you take the top 180 ones, they employ 250,000 people in Idaho. And you look at the total income that is generated, not including federal, but just local income tax from employees. They pay, Idaho has a corporate income tax, and then also the sales tax. About 8%, let's say, are from outsiders or visitors, so they're not. But the rest, like 92%, is estimated to be from actual residents. It's hard to measure that. So when you take a look at that, in terms of the total budget, right? Just the top 180 companies bring in theoretically $1.5 billion. And if you wanted to go specifically just with the corporate tax, what is that? With the corporate tax they bring in directly, it's $280 million. Now there are talks about like the costs of the grocery tax, right? And then also the launch program. I believe that was $130 million. I mean, so I believe if you include both the launch program and the grocery tax, you'll see here that the corporations, just the big 180, the top 180 employers, already bring in $280 million from those taxes. So it's more than that. So when you're looking at it from, I'm not saying one way should be another, and actually that's going to be the other part of this, the moral aspect. So I'll get to that. Regarding the from their perspective, I mean, they're bringing in all the taxes, right? They're the ones bringing in all the jobs. I mean, they're employing 27%, one quarter, and I'm going to make the claim that when you look here, I'm going to have to go here, because the IACI, which is the stand-in for, let's say, the top 180, they removed their board of directors, so you have to pull up some archived version here. But they have a lot of board of directors. I'm not exactly sure how they're structured, but within the board of directors, you have the executive committee here. Here's the asterisks here, executive committee members. And so when you take a look at the ones that are actually calling the shot for IACI, you have Idaho Forest Group, Idaho Materials and Construction, Idaho Power Company, J.R. Simplot, which is a major agricultural company, Pacific Source Health Plans, Health St. Alphonsus Health System, and here's Western States Equipment. They deal, I think, primarily with heavy construction equipment, but they're primarily based in Idaho. So the ones calling the shots in IACI, and a lot of the I think one of the difficulties with looking at Idaho, what you call big companies or big corporations, and trying to put that in the same way that you see it on the federal and international level, I think that that's not accurate to say, because these companies, the big companies, right, that you call the crony capitalist of Idaho, the big 180, they're predominantly Idaho based. And so any sort of crony sort of taxes that get paid out to these guys, through the lobbying effort of IACI and their whatever super PAC arm, it's not like the super corporations of like Disney, of Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, or sorry, it's Meta now, on the international scale. It's not like you're paying money to help Ford, right, in Detroit, build a factory in Mexico, and all of those tax dollars end up going out of the country, to help Mexico, and then now you have, now they're losing workers, right? Detroit got absolutely ripped apart because of outsourced labor. In the case of Idaho, these companies, when you start looking through all of these companies, they invest back into Idaho. So I think that's kind of like, you know, when you have these sort of like moderates, or sorry, what they call the rhinos, or just whatever, Republicans, and when they're saying they are putting Idaho first, right? They can say that because even if you are taxing or whatever, you're giving all of these kickbacks or these special benefits to these companies, these companies are in turn creating more jobs and putting it back into Idaho. They're reinvesting in Idaho. Now, it would be different if they're taking these tax benefits and they're putting it in like Florida, right, or California. Yes, that would be a bigger problem. But we have to remember that, we moved to Idaho. Many people from California are outside, moved to Idaho for a reason. And the way that we're observing things being run now is how they've always been run before. So they were obviously doing something right, and it's not correct to compare international companies that open up factories in Mexico, right, with Idaho companies. I mean, yeah, these are companies in Idaho. Their board of directors, are predominantly in Idaho, or enough of their business, enough of their jobs are based in Idaho, so it comes back. And how does it come back? Well, like I said, it comes back in jobs, and from those jobs, right, you have from the employment, you have the income tax generated from those employees, right? And then you have the sales tax, and then so that's just those three categories. And so, you can look at, let's say, for example, something like Micron, right? And, the government Idaho gives some kind of special benefits to Micron. Now, on the ideological side, you could say, oh, that's crony capitalism. We can't give them, any sort of, deals. The other side of the coin is, you want Micron, like let's say you put in $1 in tax incentives, and in return, what they do is, you just kind of giving them a little incentive, because the thing is, it's a competition, right? So Micron can decide to open up here or whatever other state. And so we just need to do, it's like the Price is Right. You just need to have it $1 more. I mean, there's all kinds of factors being decided on whether you, as a company, where you're going to invest your infrastructure, where you're going to put the capital improvements, building up that, huge, those factories. And so let's say, the government or the state, the state of Idaho says, okay, we'll give you $1 in tax incentives, or crony capitalist, just basically a bribe. In exchange, you agree to put in $99 of your own money, right? And that $99, that $1 that Idaho pays, or from the taxpayers, you'll get much more back from just the corporate taxes after they're built, and the extra income they're going to be generating, because they're selling their products outside of the state of Idaho, right? Those chips are, because they have a nexus within Idaho, even though they sell the chips outside, they get taxed at the corporate tax rate. So in terms of a return on investment, tax-wise, they call this, I think, pay for. But anyway, if you look at the financial side of things, it makes sense money-wise, or just purely from a tax point of view, to just pay that $1, right? Because you're going to get it back. You're going to get $99 back, and it's better. Your other option is to give them nothing, and Micron goes to Georgia, right? Micron goes to some other state. Micron goes to some other country, okay? And now, when you look at opportunity costs, what you could have gotten versus getting zero, them leaving, it ends up being worse. just go with me. This is financially worse in terms of like if you're building a business and you're investing and you're trying to get investors, into your company, right? You want to incentivize, these companies to do that. Now, that is just the financial side. So I think what you have is, and you see Idaho growing that way because you have basically this circle of taxes, and it's all staying within the system, and it's growing and growing and growing because you can export. You're exporting those agricultural products. You're exporting those chips, right? I'm not sure about I think with the equipment, one of them, you're exporting all of these things, and you're bringing money into Idaho. So this ends up being, overall, financially, it makes Idaho more and more prosperous. Timber is another item. A lot of agricultural products, dairy being that. So, okay, so that's the financial side. Now, if this is how Idaho has been going on, this whole time, right? And it's, that's why all, the Californians are moving in, because it is a prosperous state, and it has been managed well. Now, what's changed though? This starts going into a discussion about boomers and different generations, and regarding the cultural shift that has happened in the U.S. And basically now you have this transgenderism. It first started a while ago. Basically convergence. Let's say the convergence of social justice warriors. Other terms they use is like social Marxism. For ease, I'm just going to say SJWs, social justice warriors. They want to impose equality. And what's happened is, oftentimes, because, if you've, for decades, right, let's say you're a boomer, right, and it's just how things have always been. Why would you think that there's some kind of fundamental shift in society? Because everything, still looks the same. You're still getting the money. The companies are still the same. But what you can see, actually, even in the board of directors, when you start looking at who's now running the show for these boards, it's a new generation. They're not boomers, right? The boomers are aging out. And their views, their cultural worldviews are different. And that's now when you start getting in this like transgender stuff, this gay stuff, and different value system. And suddenly, instead of having, let's say these good old Idaho businesses, look, the money is still flowing the way it's always been. Creating this circle of tax incentives helps make the business grow bigger. And then the bigger the business, they bring in more taxes, they bring in more jobs, more income tax, more corporate tax, more sales tax. Allows this loop to go through. Allows the Idaho government to invest in more infrastructure, and it just continues on and on. But so it got hijacked. And this is where by the SJWs, and they converge on these organizations. They get in the boards or whatever, or you can even say, the board members, because the board are the ones who aren't really in control. And it's this kind of like this faceless group of individuals, but not one person can just make a decision for the entire company. This is unlike, what you often see with founders of companies. And I'm not sure what the history of all of these Idaho companies, but Idaho hasn't been a state for a long time. I think it was like the late 1800s. So you could see even within like 3 generations, right, the values, the original family values of the founder, who would reject, this push for transgender mutilation or whatever, or for abortion, or gay pride, right? They would have been appalled they would have absolutely rejected IACI, right? And whatever they're trying to push. They would say, "Whoa, that's not why I made money. I'm not here to corrupt things." And you can even see this a little bit with, is it? You could see this when you talk with the older guys who have retired or aren't really as involved in the leadership. I can't really quite find it, but this is not. Their ancestors, the ones who founded these companies, they would be rolling in their graves. But it doesn't matter. It's just like Disney, right? Like Walt Disney, the founder, he would be rolling in his grave to see what Disney has become today. And so this is where, where I get off the whole entirely materialist point of view, and maybe, they. You kind of want to keep the money flowing the way it's always been, and it's been prosperous. It's been good for Idaho, in terms of creating jobs. But because of the convergence or the infection of this SJW ideology into these companies that used to be more, let's say, just Christian values, traditional Christian values, and now you have a board that are more sympathetic. I mean, you just need a majority, right? And then the others are just kind of scared, right? Like, how many times do you with this cancel culture, can you imagine being, one of these board members? Can you imagine being one of these politicians and you're just scared? Because people don't, in general, like the older generation, they don't know how to deal with the SJW mobs. They're not part of the meme culture. They didn't play online gaming. I mean, I think if you've been playing online Xbox Live or anything online, you got a pretty thick skin, right? With the names that have been called on you. I mean, it's like whatever, But a lot of them, they're not of that, situation, and they just, they melt. They melt. You call them racist, and they just absolutely melt. And so there's this kind of, that's kind of what happens on the, let's say, on the cultural side of these companies, and they've been hijacked away from the traditional Christian values that made Idaho great. And if there isn't pushback, against, I mean, boy, I wish I could say you could just have, like, you could probably still continue everything the way it was without really as much problems, but you add this cultural element, this moral perversion level where there is an agenda, right? Where they are, really trying to push this on people, and it's like a foreign invasion because they're not your people. That's not what the majority of that is not what the Idahoans are. And I don't even mean native Idahoans. I mean whoever has even moved in. Idaho is like almost like a proposition state, right? Because it's the idea of a Christian values, and that's what is probably upsetting people more. Because like if I just made this material argument, regarding taxes and whatever sort of benefits they're getting, they're in return they're bringing in a lot better things. I mean, that's typically like the Koch brothers. I'm not sure how you KOCH, or the typical anarcho-capitalist sort of view is you can make this kind of financial sort of agreement. So like for every $10 you give me for my business, I will put in $100, which will result in $100 more in taxes, like a 10-for-1 return in terms of projected taxes. And we're going to build Idaho. We're not going to take your tax, the tax benefits you give me as the company and go build a factory in Mexico and put the money there, right? We're Idaho we're Idaho company, we're putting in Idaho. Yeah, they might have Utah and Wyoming and other states, but generally speaking, it all comes back. But this cultural thing is the problem. Now, another thing you will hear has to deal with this argument regarding Marxism, like, oh, this is communist or this is Marxism. I think this is, in terms of a separate discussion on that. When you look at it from a Christian point of view, there are no governmental systems which are specifically from God, except like monarchy, which is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, Jesus Christ, coming back and ruling over the world, or the city, the great city. So this has been kind of the basis, for of what is the God ordained sort of governmental system for thousands of years. I mean, I believe the City of God by blanking on the name, not Aquinas. No, maybe Aquinas. Yeah, maybe it was Thomas Aquinas. But this has been, the basis, the divine right of kings for a long time. So there's probably a stronger moral argument you can make for monarchy than definitely not rule by the mob. And I don't think definitely when we're talking about ranked choice voting, when we're talking about the system, the initiative system, right, where you can just have majority rule, because people in Idaho don't want that, because they know what's going to happen. Just like if you have in Oregon or in Washington State, you have Portland deciding for Washington State, you have Seattle deciding for Washington State, Portland for Oregon, and then you essentially have Boise deciding for all of Idaho. So that's why the conservative Christians prefer to have this representative system. So there's kind of like, this is just a much more nuanced discussion, besides just calling people names like Rhino or something like that. And I mean, that's, the moral issue needs to be the primary concern. In terms of the finances, what I was talking about here is just from the corporate income tax. I say, you look on, what did Jesus say? I don't want to be, claiming I'm going to do really bad biblical interpretation. But look, they paid that much into the system. And if they get those kinds of kickbacks, to me personally, it's like whatever. But what I cannot tolerate is the moral perversion and the destruction of the moral fiber. And this goes further when relating to the governmental system. Monarchies can be great if the monarch is Jesus Christ. All right. I mean, I would love that, right? And maybe we have some saints in Idaho that they could be a monarch, and Idaho would be great in terms of a moral system. The system can only be as good as the people, and this was also something that was discussed with one of the founding fathers. This sort of governmental system, the U.S. governmental system, how they structured it, it can only work for moral people. And you can have a pure democracy, you can have a communist government. It doesn't matter what the government type is if the people are rotten. It doesn't matter if you sign a contract, right? Because this is all that it is. It's just an agreement, something on a piece of paper, and maybe you go through courts, and maybe the judges are bad too and corrupt. Right now, we're seeing that. It's only as good as the people that sign the paper, that come to whatever agreement or agree to the rules. You can sign all kinds of contracts, and I've done this in business quite a bit with just really rotten people, and they had no intention ever of honoring the agreement. And what are you going to do? You go to court, you waste tens of thousands of dollars, and guess what? You can't collect because they have no money. So what was the point of all that? Like if I had just originally looked at the character of the person first, right? Same thing with marriage. It doesn't matter if they sign and they put a vow, death till you part, right? You have to look at the person. The piece of paper is just a piece of paper. It means nothing. Oaths mean nothing to some people, to many people, probably to most people. It doesn't mean anything. So same thing with a society is that you may if you have a society filled with people who you know regarding abortion believe that it's not murdering a baby, then they're going to that's their culture. That and this difference in culture is so much to the point you should be different countries. And this is right. This is what they're saying about go back to California, right? Which means we don't want your liberal ideas here. Because it's like a foreign country. It's like a completely different people group. And everyone definitely felt this, right? Especially during COVID or during the whole Trump Hillary thing. They're completely different tribes, and there cannot be, what do they say? It's going to be the great divorce. And so you're having this thing regarding on the cultural side, on the moral system, and I could make an argument that regarding the child chemicals or mutilation, that bill, and that created this huge controversy. And why was it so controversial? Well, you are putting, I think fundamentally, when I was looking at the arguments, yes, you can say that's the parents' right if they want to cut off or do whatever, right? Parents' rights are there. But there's also the aspect of, and then the people who want to, go through all the hormone therapy and do all those things. What were they saying? They were saying, this is creating a very hostile and unfriendly environment to me. If you continue and do this, we're going to have to move. And right, it's that, or like abortion. Oh, if this is making it unbearable for me to live here in Idaho anymore because you guys are all a bunch of white supremacist, Nazi, Christian fundamentalists, right? Why are we? And this, right? Isn't this this is the exact same feeling that why the people in California had to move out because they were getting called those same names, but in the case of Boise, they're kind of the minority in terms of in the representative system. But in California, it was the opposite, where the conservative Christians were the minority, so they fled to where they perceived to have a greater majority. And we see this in the statistics and in the makeup of the Senate and a lot of the elected positions. So this is the moral issue is, when you're creating all of these systems or these rules and laws, it's favoring a specific cultural group, a specific value system that is offensive, right? Both sides, when you look at the spectrum, both sides, abortion or the children situation and pornography in the libraries, it is offensive to the other side. And I believe that there was a book on righteousness. The one side feels they're righteous and the other side is unrighteous because they're talking about, that this goes a different sort of philosophical discussion on equality and inequality and hierarchy. So, can't overstate that. Now, I'm bringing all this up because when I start doing the reviews, and this is something that what is sometimes funny about what the criticism is toward libertarians, and is that libertarians tend to be materialists. They just, when you look at the big American libertarians, Rothbard, Ayn Rand, they tend to be hardcore materialists. Like they don't really. I mean, I think they were, some of them were Jewish, but they didn't really believe in God. Functional atheists. Maybe they're agnostic. I'm not sure, but the spiritual side of things was never considered. The moral system was never considered, and even within like libertarian political thinking today, it's just kind of like very, you can enter some very dark moral spaces when you build a moral system based off of what they call the non-aggression principle. Basically, if you consent to it, then it's morally okay. And obviously, that is not going to fly with Christian ethics, with Christian morality, just because that's not how it works. And so these are, if you are a Christian, you understand that there is a war, a spiritual war going on, that it's not necessarily against, the princes and principalities of who you can see, but it is a war that is going on in the spiritual realm that we cannot see. And you see this spiritual war, or the Satan or the demons working off of the levers of power that exist within, I would say in Idaho, within the boards, and within these various agencies, with this infestation of SJW, ideology, just straight up satanic. And so this is why you start seeing this on the local side, and a lot of some of the politicians may be blind to it, especially maybe more of the mainstream ones that just kind of see the spiritual side as kind of a neutral thing or just not important. And also remember, they get voted in by the people of their district. So if their people are amoral or they don't care, then it doesn't. They can just stay in power because nobody sees them. They can, stay in entirely based off of the material argument, based off of all the money. I made that money argument. It's really compelling, and I was almost convinced until you just, at what cost? You can gain the whole world but lose your soul. What is the point of that? And if you look at Idaho, this is the fight, because you can see people, they don't want Idaho to be a Christian fundamentalist state, okay, and then you want people in Idaho that want to make it a Christian state. Not that it's like theologically run that way, but the value system is toward the Christian fundamental values. And that is a war between different tribes, between different nations. You could say, it's kind of a soft civil war. And will it go hot? I mean, I think people would move. I think it may naturally be happening. You see all kinds of documentaries on Idaho about the white supremacists, and now with the abortion law that was passed, regarding the transgender things that getting passed. I'm not sure if the porn in the libraries got passed or not, but these kinds of things, these sort of Christian values being pushed on the legislative side of things, it is making the other side very uncomfortable, or I'd say the liberals or the social justice warriors very uncomfortable. And even when Ammon Bundy got like 100,000 views, you can basically see this if you go to the subreddit of Idaho. I mean, that's just fully infested with social justice warriors. But you can see the angst and the anger and what they're feeling. I mean, this is not. I mean, what was when Trump got elected? The girls screaming in the sky. I will mention in terms of like governmental systems. It's not there's no problem, I think, you know, of elites, right? There's no problem. There's always going to be elites in any sort of society. I mean, I think Donald Trump, right, is the prime example of I know he's polarizing, but that he is fighting against a lot of this SJW nonsense, and head on. And Donald Trump was, until he started stepping out, was part of the elite. And so, in terms of how the system generally is set up, the business owners, or definitely not poor people, are going to be part of the representatives, or the elected representatives. And so anyway, that's a whole thing. I'm not saying, I'm seeing the moral system basically to be key. And other people say that politics is downstream from culture. And so, as the laws and as the moral laws get passed toward making certain groups feel uncomfortable, that's they have California, and they have Oregon, and they have Washington State, right? There's plenty of other states, but people are moving to Idaho for their belief that Idaho is one of the last Christian states. And I do hesitate to use the word conservative. What does that even mean? I mean, I think if you look at it at the federal level, the moderate conservatives, the moderate Republicans, who often vote in a very democratic sort of way, can make a strong argument that they are true Republicans in the George Bush tradition, right? George, whatever the Mitt Romney tradition, or the way that the Republicans on the federal level vote. I mean, you could say they're all fake, but that's part of the war with battles. So anyway, I think 50 minutes is coming up. I think that's pretty much it. Got that whole thing of how I'm viewing things. And so I'll be analyzing things, and this will come up, this is where you'll start seeing me in conflict, perhaps, well, to some degree, with the IFF and certain things, because they may look at things more from the traditional materialistic, sort of view. Like, their metrics is this pushing us closer to God, right? Is this pushing us closer to Christian values? Now, it may end up working out in the end. It might line up in any case. But I think, I don't want to give it away, but I was actually a little bit surprised with my investigation of Senator Todd Lakey, because he gets kind of low scores on these traditional, or on a lot of these metrics. But when I will show you, when you put morality into focus, I think you start seeing him in a better light. And when you start downplaying kind of the importance of, this money issue, it's not, what is the priority here, right? Do I really chagrin if some of that 280 million, the big 180, comes back as kickbacks to them? Do I really care, as long as the moral system remains intact, as long as they don't attempt to pervert it? Of course, it tends to not work that way, but that'll be in further discussions when we actually go through each of the representatives. So I'm not purely looking at it just. I would say first priority when I look at things is the moral system, is maintaining the integrity of Christianity in the state, Christian values, and then the secondary priority is financial, and then we'll see how it goes. All right, have a good one. Bye bye.